Sometimes the warmest smile hides the coldest intent. And sometimes the biggest mistake you can make in this world is believing that kindness will protect you. What if I told you that every time you put your heart first, someone else is already calculating how to use it against you? History is filled with people who lost everything, not because they were weak, but because they were too kind at the wrong moment. Now imagine if you had the power to step back, detach, and become strategically cold, not cruel, not heartless, but sharp enough to see through illusions and strong enough to act when others hesitate. This is where Machiavelli enters the story. To most people, his name is synonymous with manipulation and ruthless power. They imagine him whispering in the ears of kings, teaching them to deceive, to betray, to strike without mercy. But that's only half the truth. The other half, the one people rarely talk about, is that Machiavelli was a man who suffered, who was exiled, who learned from pain and failure. His lessons weren't born in luxury or comfort. They came from watching power slip through his hands, from betrayal by allies, from knowing how fragile loyalty really is. That is why his words carry weight. He didn't just write about strategy. He lived the consequences of not having enough of it. In this video, you are going to discover those lessons that make you strategically cold. The kind of lessons Machiavelli never sugarcoated. You'll see how he warned rulers not to rely too much on love, because love fades when tested. You'll learn why he believed appearances matter more than honesty, why silence often speaks louder than words, and why sometimes being feared just enough can protect you better than endless kindness. These are not comfortable truths, but they are timeless ones. They can help you navigate not just politics and power, but workplaces, relationships, and everyday struggles where influence is at play. Stay with me until the very end, because the final lesson may challenge everything you've been taught about morality and success. It's the kind of truth that unsettles you at first, but once you see it, you can't unsee it. That's the Machiavellian edge, the hidden ability to move through the world with eyes open, unshaken by sentiment, untouchable by manipulation. And here's the suspense. Some of these lessons are so rarely discussed that even those who quote the prince never fully grasp them. You're about to hear them not as distant theories, but as strategies you can recognize in your own life today. Welcome to Psych Algorithm, where we decode the psychology of power, strategy, and influence. If you're ready to see the world through Machiavelli's eyes, if you want to learn how to be strategically cold without losing your humanity, then this journey is for you. Make sure you subscribe now, so you don't miss the insights that could change the way you play the game of life. Before we talk about the lessons that will make you strategically cold, we need to step back and understand the man behind them, Niccolò Machiavelli. Born in Florence in 1469, Machiavelli was not a king, not a general, and not a nobleman with endless wealth. He was a civil servant, a diplomat, and an observer of power during one of the most chaotic times in Italian history. His world was a chessboard of city-states, each one rising and falling through alliances, betrayals, and wars. Florence, his home, was a place where a single wrong decision could end not just your career, but your life. Machiavelli served as a diplomat for the Florentine Republic, where he negotiated with kings, emperors, and even the ruthless Pope Alexander VI, and his infamous son Cesare. It was here, watching men like Borgia move with both charm and brutality, that Machiavelli saw what true power looked like. He saw that morality, as most people understood it, was often a weakness. Leaders who clung to virtue too tightly were destroyed by those who were willing to bend, twist, or discard it altogether. From this harsh reality came Machiavelli's cold lessons. When Machiavelli wrote his most famous work, The Prince, he wasn't writing a book of philosophy for armchair thinkers. He was creating a survival manual for those who lived in the dangerous game of politics. He stripped away illusions about goodness and fairness, and instead showed the raw mechanics of control. To him, power was not about ideals, but about results. A ruler could appear merciful, but when mercy endangered stability, Cruelty was not only justified, it was necessary. This is where his reputation as ruthless began. But it's only part of the truth. What makes Machiavelli unique is not that he encouraged cruelty, but that he urged leaders to think beyond personal feelings. He believed decisions should be made with cold clarity, guided by strategy, not by emotion. It wasn't about being evil, it was about surviving in a world where kindness, without caution, could get you killed. His lessons were not for monsters, they were for those who wanted to hold their ground when surrounded by enemies, allies with hidden knives, and shifting tides of fortune. In Machiavelli's eyes, survival demanded discipline, adaptability, and a willingness to act colder than others expected. These are the lessons that still echo today, shaping how we understand influence, leadership, and the hidden cost of power. Power is rarely lost in a single blow. More often, it slips away in small, unnoticed moments. When decisions are made in haste, when words are spoken in anger, when the heart is allowed to take command over the mind. Machiavelli understood this better than most. He watched men rise quickly only to fall just as fast, undone not by external enemies, but by their own unchecked emotions. That is why his first and most important lesson is to detach emotion from decision. To Machiavelli, emotions were not to be erased or denied. They were to be observed, studied, and treated as signals. Anger, fear, pride, or pity. These feelings reveal the state of a situation, but they should never dictate the response. If you decide in anger, you expose your weakness to others. If you let pity guide you, you risk being exploited. By separating the emotional reaction from the strategic decision, you gain control over both yourself and the battlefield around you. Machiavelli would say, emotions are like smoke. They cloud your vision if you breathe them in. But if you step back, you can see where the fire truly burns. He saw how predictable human behavior became when driven by feelings. A man insulted will seek revenge. A ruler loved too much by his people might hesitate to act firmly when order breaks. A leader blinded by loyalty may ignore betrayal until it is too late. Those who allow emotions to decide for them are not acting. They are being acted upon. They are readable like an open book, and in politics, in business, and in life. Being predictable is being vulnerable. This is why Machiavelli's cold advice was not to suppress emotions entirely, but to treat them as data. Let them inform you, but never let them command you. Once you understand this, the second lesson becomes clearer. It is better to be feared than loved, if you must choose between the two. To modern ears, this sounds brutal, almost monstrous. But Machiavelli wasn't telling leaders to reject love entirely. He was warning them that love is unreliable. People love you when it benefits them. They love you when you give them something. Love fades when times grow hard, when resources dry up, when expectations are not met. Fear, on the other hand, is more consistent. If people fear the consequences of betraying you, they are less likely to test those boundaries. Still, Machiavelli was careful to add a critical detail. Fear is useful, but hatred is fatal. A leader who rules through sheer cruelty risks uniting enemies against him. Hatred breeds rebellion. Measured fear breeds respect. The balance lies in authority, firm enough to deter betrayal, but not so harsh that it provokes desperate resistance. Machiavelli admired Cesare Borgia for mastering this balance. Borgia punished disloyalty without hesitation, but he also created order and stability where chaos once reigned. People feared him, yes, but they also relied on him. That is why his power endured, at least for a time. Fear works because it is rooted in survival. A person's love for you may be outweighed by their love for themselves, but their fear of consequences, of punishment, of loss, keeps them aligned with what you will. Machiavelli saw that rulers who relied only on love eventually faced betrayal, while those who managed fear secured loyalty that could not be shaken by mere affection. This lesson, though harsh, is one that continues to echo in every field where leadership and influence matter. Yet even fear can be undone if you reveal too much of your own hand. This leads us to the third lesson. Conceal your intentions. Machiavelli insisted that transparency, though praised in moral philosophy, often dangerous in politics and power. If others know your plan in full, they can counter it, sabotage it, or use it against you. But if they only see fragments, if they are left uncertain about your next move, they are forced to act cautiously, unsure of how to respond. Strategic ambiguity is not about lying for the sake of lies. It is about understanding that silence, vagueness, or even misdirection can be more powerful than declarations. Machiavelli observed that those who spoke openly about their desires invited opposition. Those who concealed their goals, however, often advanced further without resistance. It is like a game of chess. Reveal too early where your queen will strike, and your opponent blocks it. Hide your intent, and by the time they realize, it is already too late. This is why Machiavelli valued discretion so highly. He believed that your words should be carefully chosen, not just for what they say, but for what they conceal. He admired leaders who spoke in generalities, who allowed others to project their own assumptions, who created confusion rather than clarity. In doing so, they forced opponents to act on guesses, which are often wrong. Concealing intentions gives you freedom, because no one can hold you to a path they cannot see. But once your intentions are questioned, the natural instinct is to defend yourself, to explain your position in detail, to reassure others. Machiavelli warned strongly against this impulse. And that brings us to the fifth lesson. Never over-explain or defend yourself. To explain too much is to show weakness. It is to admit that you care about convincing others, that their opinion matters more than your authority. When you defend yourself, you put yourself on trial, and trials invite judgment. Machiavelli believed that power thrives in ambiguity. A ruler, a leader, or even an individual should not scramble to justify every action. Silence, or a calm refusal to explain, often does more maintain authority than any long speech could. Over-explaining shifts control to the audience. They become the judges of your reasoning. By withholding explanation, you force others to sit with uncertainty. They may dislike it, but they cannot attack what they cannot fully grasp. This ties directly into the fifth lesson. Appear honorable, but act pragmatically. Machiavelli recognized that appearances are a kind of armor. People want to believe in honor, integrity, and virtue. They judge by what they see, not by what truly is. Therefore, a leader should maintain the image of honor, fairness, and loyalty. But beneath that surface, he must be willing to act with pragmatism, to bend morality when the survival of his state or himself requires it. This is not hypocrisy in Machiavelli's view. It is strategy. A ruler who openly rejects virtue invites enemies and disgust, but one who appears virtuous while reserving the freedom to act otherwise gains the best of both worlds, trust from the people, and freedom to maneuver behind the curtain. It is like wearing a mask, not to deceive endlessly, but to protect oneself from the harsh judgment of a world that clings to ideals yet punishes those who live by them too rigidly. Machiavelli's own life reflected this. He valued honesty in private dealings, but knew that in politics, sincerity without strategy was suicide. He argued that men in power could not afford to be bound by ideals. In reality demanded otherwise. In war, in governance, in diplomacy, results mattered more than purity. To survive, you had to be pragmatic beneath the cloak of honor. But what happens when even pragmatism fails? When the ground shifts? When the strategy that once worked now falters? That is when Machiavelli's sixth lesson becomes essential. Be adaptable. Rigidity, he believed, is the greatest danger to any ruler. A man who succeeds with one method often clings to it, believing it will always bring victory. But the world changes. Fortune, that unpredictable force Machiavelli wrote about so often, turns against those who cannot change with it. Adaptability means recognizing when to abandon old tactics and adopt new ones. It means understanding that what works in times of peace may fail in times of war, that a show of mercy in one moment may require recoil in another. Machiavelli admired leaders who could transform themselves, gentle in diplomacy, fierce in battle, cunning in negotiation, silent in conspiracy. He saw adaptability not as weakness, but as strength, the ability to flow around obstacles rather than shatter against them. The adaptable leader is like water, shaping itself to whatever container it is placed in. He does not resist change. He uses it. Machiavelli argued that those who fail to adapt are eventually destroyed by those who do. The rigid man, no matter how skilled, becomes predictable. The adaptable man remains dangerous, because he cannot be anticipated. In this way, adaptability becomes not just survival, but the very essence of strategic coldness. The willingness to abandon comfort, habit, or pride in order to win. These 6 lessons: detaching emotion, choosing fear over love when necessary, concealing intentions, avoiding over-explanation, appearing honorable while acting pragmatically, and embracing adaptability, are not abstract ideas locked away in history. They are living principles, drawn from a time of shifting alliances, ruthless ambition, and constant danger. Machiavelli wrote them, not as ideals, but as weapons, forged in the fire of experience. They remain as sharp today as when he first penned them, waiting for those who are willing to use them with discipline, caution, and strategic coldness. Machiavelli's lessons often strike with the cold precision of a blade. They are not meant to comfort you, but to sharpen your awareness. By now it is clear that power is not a matter of ant. It is a matter of perception, timing, and discipline. That is why his 7th lesson is about cultivating strategic observation, what could be called the Machiavellian scanner. To Machiavelli, the world was not random chaos. It was a pattern of moves, signals, and forces. He believed that the difference between those who rise and those who are crushed often lies in who is paying closer attention. Strategic observation means scanning the environment constantly, not with paranoia, but with clarity. Who is speaking to whom? Who controls resources? Who is trusted and who is quietly resented? Power is rarely displayed openly. It hides in gestures, in alliances, in silences that pass unnoticed by the distracted. Machiavelli advised rulers to study men, because men rarely change. They repeat the same desires, fears, and betrayals. A ruler who trains himself to observe will see what others miss: the hesitation in a rival's tone, the ambition behind a servant's flattery, the hidden cracks in a supposedly unbreakable alliance. To cultivate this kind of observation, one must step back from the noise. Most people are too busy speaking, reacting, or defending themselves to truly see. Machiavelli's advice was to slow down and watch. A room of men arguing often reveals more in their silences than in their words. A court full of allies may hide traitors in plain sight. By observing without announcing your observation, you collect information that becomes leverage. If you see who holds grudges, who hungers for recognition, who waits for an opportunity, you can shape the battlefield before the first strike is ever made. But Machiavelli knew that observation alone was not enough. The next step was to use silence and absence as weapons. This is his 8th lesson, one often overlooked, because it requires restraint rather than action. Most people fear silence. They rush to fill it with words, explanations, or justifications. Machiavelli saw silence as power. When you do not respond immediately, you force others to reveal more, to expose their thoughts, to guess at your own position. A pause unsettles them. They wonder what you are thinking, what you are planning, whether you are judging or simply indifferent. Absence carries a similar effect. When you make yourself constantly available, your presence loses weight. But when you withdraw, whether from a meeting, a negotiation, or even from someone's daily life, you create space for your value to expand. Your absence becomes a mirror in which others project their needs, fears, and questions. People start to ask why you are not there. And in their speculation, your importance grows. Machiavelli recognized this dynamic long before modern psychology explained it. Scarcity breeds desire, and silence creates pressure. By withholding presence, you do not lose influence. You magnify it. The Caesar Borgia, whom Machiavelli admired deeply, used silence as a tool. He often sat in meetings without saying a word, letting others speak themselves into traps. By the time he finally vulnerably, his words carried the weight of inevitability. His silence forced others to expose their true positions. Machiavelli noted this as a masterstroke. Control not through endless speech, but through disciplined restraint. Silence in the hands of a strategist becomes louder than any declaration. Still, silence cannot be a mask forever. There are moments when even the most calculating leader must show humanity. That is why the 9th lesson is about knowing when to show vulnerability, but selectively. Machiavelli was not naive. He understood that a leader who appears cold at all times risks being seen as inhuman, distant, untrustworthy. Complete coldness breeds fear, but without any warmth, fear can turn into resentment. The solution is to allow glimpses of vulnerability, not as a weakness, but as a strategy. Selective vulnerability disarms suspicion. When a leader admits a small failure, shows genuine fatigue, or confesses uncertainty in a limited way, it convinces others of his authenticity. People trust someone who seems human. The key is control. Vulnerability should never be constant, never shown to everyone, never allowed to expose the core of your strength. It must be rare and reserved for those whose trust you need most. Advisors, allies, or the people whose loyalty secures your power. Like a calculated gesture, it must feel spontaneous but serve a purpose. Machiavelli saw how rulers who appeared too perfect alienated their people. They seemed untouchable, beyond human experience. Those who allowed occasional vulnerability, however, drew their followers closer. But he warned, show too much, and you risk exploitation. A ruler who cries openly, who reveals doubts often, or who leans too heavily on others, becomes prey. Vulnerability is not a habit. It is a tool sharpened for rare but powerful use. From this emerges the 10th lesson. Prioritize results over intentions. Machiavelli's writing is ruthless in this regard. He dismissed the value of good intentions unless they produce tangible outcomes. To him, the world did not reward purity of heart. It rewarded effectiveness. A ruler who acted with noble motives, but failed to protect his state, would be remembered as weak, not virtuous. Meanwhile, one who committed morally questionable acts, but secured stability and prosperity, would be praised, even loved in the long run. This lesson cuts deep into the illusions of morality. Machiavelli was not arguing that intentions are worthless, but that they are secondary. The measure of action is its effect, not its motive. A man may intend to be merciful, but if his mercy breeds disorder, the result condemns him. Another may intend only to secure his throne, but if his actions bring peace to the land, the people benefit regardless of his personal aim. The world, Machiavelli argued, judges outcomes more than motives. History remembers victories, not explanations. This perspective forces a cold clarity. It strips away excuses. If your plan fails, it does not matter that you meant well. If your choices succeed, people will find ways to call them just. The danger lies in clinging to intentions when they blind you to results. Machiavelli urged leaders to be pragmatic. If one method does not bring the desired outcome, abandon it and choose another. Do not be bound by pride in your motives. Be bound only by the effectiveness of your results. The final lesson, often overlooked, but vital, is to maintain moral ambiguity for protection. Machiavelli understood that once people believe they can define you as good or evil, merciful or cruel, they how to predict you. Predictability is dangerous. When your enemies believe you are always virtuous, they will exploit that virtue. When they believe you are always cruel, they will rally others against you. The key is to remain unreadable, to avoid being trapped in a single category. Moral ambiguity creates caution. If no one knows whether you will act with mercy or severity, they hesitate to test you. If they cannot decide whether you are a friend or a rival, they tread lightly. Machiavelli admired leaders who could be both feared and loved, both generous and ruthless, shifting between masks as the situation demanded. This ambiguity not only protected them, but expanded their influence. People respect what they cannot fully understand. By refusing to be easily classified, you force others to engage with you on your terms. They cannot rely on stereotypes or assumptions. They must approach with caution. This protects you from manipulation because you do not reveal which moral levers can move you. It also allows you to act freely, unbound by the expectations others place upon good or evil men. To Machiavelli, this was not hypocrisy, it was armor. Moral ambiguity was the cloak that shielded a leader from predictable attack. Strategic observation, silence, selective vulnerability, results over intentions, and moral ambiguity. Each of these lessons builds upon the others. Together, they form a framework of strategic coldness. Not cruelty, but clarity. Not heartlessness, but discipline. Machiavelli's world was one of shifting alliances, treachery, and fragile power. Yet these lessons remain alive today, guiding those who dare to look beyond appearances and see the machinery of influence as it truly is. We've walked through the world of Machiavelli, and together we've uncovered lessons that strip away illusions and force us to see power in its raw form. We saw why detaching emotions from decisions gives you control when others are lost in anger or pity. We examined why being feared is more stable than being loved, why silence and ambiguity often carry more weight than words, and why appearances matter even when reality tells a different story. We discovered the strength of adaptability, the power of observation, the careful use of vulnerability, and the sharp truth that results matter more than intentions. Finally, we looked at moral ambiguity, not as deceit, but as protection against being trapped in one box forever. But before you rush to take these lessons and sharpen them into weapons, here's the warning you must remember. These ideas are cold, and they can cut both ways. If you lean too far into fear, you may create enemies where none existed. If you conceal too much, people may grow suspicious. If you prioritize results without caution, you may damage trust that could have served you for years. Machiavelli's wisdom is powerful, but it is not a script for cruelty. It is a reminder that clarity sometimes requires restraint, and that survival often demands a kind of discipline that looks cold from the outside. These lessons can elevate you, but they can also isolate you if used recklessly. So here's the question I want to leave with you. Which of these lessons speaks to you most right now? Is it the need to detach from emotions that cloud your judgment? Is it the call to observe a mirror carefully, to finally see the patterns that others ignore? Or is it the reminder that appearances matter, that the way you're seen can be just as important as what you truly are? Reflect on this, because choosing even one lesson to apply could shift the way you move through the world. The final takeaway is this: strategic coldness is not cruelty. It is not about turning yourself into a heartless figure who crushes everyone in the way. It is about wearing disciplined armor. It is about protecting your mind from being manipulated, your emotions from being exploited, and your path from being derailed. To be strategically cold is to understand that kindness, warmth, and trust can still exist, but they must be offered on your terms, not forced upon you by others. It is strength disguised as calm, clarity hidden behind silence, and adaptability that bends without breaking. So here's your challenge. Don't try to live all 11 lessons at once. Pick just one, and test it in a safe part of your life. Maybe it's work. Hold back your first emotional reaction in a meeting and see how much more control you gain. Maybe it's negotiation. Stay silent longer than usual, and watch the other person fill the void with information you can use. Or maybe it's relationships. Observe more than you speak, and you'll start noticing truths that were invisible before. Test one, see the effect, and learn what it feels like to step into this cold discipline. And if this exploration opened your eyes, if Machiavelli's words stirred something in you, then I invite you to keep walking with us on this journey. Like this video so more people can discover these Aten lessons. Subscribe to Psych Algorithm so you don't miss the next chapter in the psychology of power, influence, and survival. And in the comments tell me, which lesson did you find the most unsettling or the most powerful? Because the truth is, power isn't about knowing, it's about seeing. And once you see through the mask, you can never go back.